De groep van St. Gallen, maar eigenlijk zeiden wij van onszelf en van die groep de maffia.
Cardinal Gottfried de Niels, a Belgian prelate, was the Archbishop of Mechelen, Brussels from 1979 to 2010. He was a key member of the very St. Gallen Mafia he mentioned in 2015, a group of powerful churchmen who worked behind the scenes to get Pope Francis elected in 2013. In the northeast corner of Switzerland is where St. Gallen is located. St. Gall was an Irish monk who spread Christianity throughout Switzerland, and he's known as the founder and patron saint of the city of St. Gallen. And today, Catholicism in Switzerland is majority non-practicing. According to a 2020 Pew Research study on so-called same-sex marriage, a full 76% of self-identified Swiss Catholics are in favor of it, rejecting the Church's infallible teaching that marriage is between one man and one woman. Switzerland's 76% is right in line with its pro-gay neighbors. The study also revealed the top 9 countries in which Catholics favored gay marriage were all European countries: the Netherlands, Belgium, the UK, Spain, France, Austria, Germany, and Ireland.
That we see all of these European countries embracing homosexual marriage is not a surprise. It's not coming out of a vacuum. Prior to the Second Vatican Council in the Netherlands, for example, mass attendance was at about 80%. After that, it started to decline, and then in 1966, out came the Dutch Catechism. By 1978, mass attendance had gone down to something like 27% in the Netherlands. The faith was utterly attacked. Principal authors of the Dutch Catechism were Edward Schillebeeckx, a Dominican, and Peter Schoenenberg, who was a Jesuit. They misrepresented the Catholic faith on a number of many things. I think it was about 15 things altogether, including the Eucharist, the virginity of Mary. And the Vatican actually put out a council of cardinals. There was a council of cardinals to look into it, and they were like, no, you got to revise this. When some of the revisions came back, and they were worse than the original. But by that point, there was already, I think, 500,000 or 1 million copies sold. So the Dutch Catechism was translated into French and Italian at that time, and was even being used in some schools of theology to teach theology. So you can see that the errors in the Dutch Catechism were just already doing their damage. Modernism, basically, is what this is. Modernism had resurfaced and got its tentacles into the church again. And from that, it's not hard to imagine that we have a St. Gallen Mafia.
The dissident Dutch Catechism was in lockstep with the notorious St. Gallen Mafia. This mafia, or circle of friends, as described in 2015 by St. Gallen's then bishop, Ivo Führer, who hosted the group from the time it first met in 1996. The mafia was founded and led by Cardinal Carlo Maria Martini, and the other key members were Cardinal Gottfried de Niels, Cardinal Walter Casper, Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, and Cardinal Achille Silvestrini. Their goal, according to historian Henry Sire, to gather these powerful, like-minded prelates together to use their vast networks of contacts to bring about what political analysts would recognize as regime change. The mafia would meet at a Benedictine monastery called Fischingen. The group of high-ranking prelates strategized their regime change by attempting to shift the Church's teachings in a more liberal direction, discarding priestly celibacy, offering communion to divorced and civilly remarried Catholics, voting for pro-abortion politicians, ordaining women priests, and normalizing homosexuality. These goals drove the mafia's agenda.
One of the members of the St. Gallen Mafia was buddies with Karl Rahner, and Karl Rahner was a peritus or peritus, a theological expert at the Second Vatican Council who used to show up in a tie all the time. He was a Jesuit. But he was a complete heretic, this guy. He had problems with the Eucharist. He wanted to get rid of priestly celibacy. It's not without surprise that Pius XII, I think around 1958, was looking into him as a heretic, was looking into Rahner as a heretic, but he died before anything could be done. And then John the 23rd invited him as a peritus to the Second Vatican Council. So again, you can see these heretics, these modernists, were rampant in the church. I've read somewhere that Pius X at one point, I believe it was one of the cardinals said to him, "Oh, Your Holiness, you've done such a good job, getting rid of modernism." And he said, "I've done no such thing." He said, "I've simply suppressed it." He said, "But if you don't keep guard, if you're not vigilant, it will rise again with a vengeance." In this world, evil will never be totally eradicated. That happens when the Lord comes to judge the living and the dead and separates the sheep from the goats. Until then, the best we can do is suppress it. And that's one of the church's big jobs, just suppress it.
Among the key members of the St. Gallen Mafia, only one, Cardinal Casper, is still living. Although almost a century later, these men and the group as a whole are what Pope St. Pius X identified in his 1907 encyclical Pascendi on the doctrine of the modernists. In speaking of modernists, who are in the ranks of the clergy, it may be that they have persuaded themselves that in all this they are really serving God and the Church. In reality, they only offend both. The leader of the Mafia, Cardinal Marzini, was an Italian Jesuit. He was the Archbishop of Milan from 1980 to 2004. During the pontificate of John Paul II, Marzini was pinned as early as 1993 to be the next pope. This idea was initially publicized by the London Sunday Times, and Marzini's profile in this article included his thoughts on women priests. When people ask me, and it's usually Americans, will we have women priests? Hoping for a 21st century change, he replied, not in this millennium. He even went on to say about contraception, the Church thinks very slowly. Cardinal Daniels was out on the loggia with Pope Francis the night of his election. 10 years earlier, the Belgian cardinal endorsed condoms, telling a Catholic TV program, if an HIV-positive person insists on having sex, he has to use a condom. Otherwise, he will commit a sin. Daniels also made headlines in 2015 after he admitted being part of the St. Gallen Mafia.
De groep van St. Gallen, maar eigenlijk zeiden we van onszelf en van die groep de Mafia.
Cardinal Casper, a good friend of Daniels, is also liked by Pope Francis, who said of Casper, he's a talented theologian, a good theologian. Casper, a German cardinal, was president of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity from 2001 to 2010. This theological confidant of Pope Francis has referred to same-sex unions as a central issue, saying about these disordered relationships, if the majority of the people want these civil partnerships, then it is the duty of the state to recognize such rights. Cardinal Murphy O'Connor, a British cardinal, was the Archbishop of Westminster from 2000 to 2009. He was also the president of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales. Murphy O'Connor was also good friends with Francis before he became Pope in 2013. The two even met for dinner in March of that year in Rome. Cardinal Silvestrini, an Italian cardinal, was the prefect of the Congregation for the Oriental Churches from 1991 to 2000. Silvestrini was to some extent Marzini's replacement in the St. Gallen Mafia after Marzini, the former leader of the group, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, the same disease Pope John Paul II suffered and ultimately died from in 2005. According to German journalist and author Paul Bade, in an interview conducted by the National Catholic Register, at the invitation of Cardinal Silvestrini, the St. Gallen group met in Villa Nazareth. The purpose of the meeting? To prevent the election of Joseph Ratzinger. This meeting called by Silvestrini was held, according to Bade, only 3 days after Karol Wojtyła, or John Paul II's, death.
We are reporting the death of Pope John Paul II at the Vatican. He was 84 years old.
The 2005 conclave proved unsuccessful for the St. Gallen Mafia as Ratzinger was elected, but 2013 was another story.
From Arius to the Albigensians, from Sabellianism to Schillebeck's, and from rationalism to Rahner, the Church has always been under attack by heretics, heresies, and demonic lies from the pits of hell. But Jesus promises his Church that the gates of hell will not prevail. So this particular period that we're in of confusion will pass, and the St. Gallen Mafia will soon become a footnote in some church history book.